It's my real pleasure to get to start off this session at the very hour of 8 in the morning. I'm going to present the PCC, the Pteridophyte Collections Consortium. 420 million years and 2 million specimens. Unfortunately, I talk fast, so we'll see how we do. I want to highlight at the very beginning, this is a project involving many contributors, but specifically I want to mention Joyce and Amy and Ed, and Ed is in the back. These are the people who've been doing the really heavy lifting to get our portal up. I'll introduce the portal in just a minute.
Uh-oh. Is it locked?
I'm not sure what buttons would be. So what is the PCC? As the name suggests, we're a consortium of Pteridophyte collections, 36 in total so far, spread across the continental United States. And we are interested, we have three main goals. The first is sort of a seemingly circular goal, which is to establish a Pteridophyte consortium. This isn't quite as circular as it seems, because we have an ulterior motive, a hidden desire to integrate the paleo and neo community. So there are many people working in paleobotany, many people working in neobotany, attempting to answer similar questions. But there is often both a structural and a cultural divide between those communities, and we're hoping that the PCC will be a way to help integrate those communities. The nitty-gritty is that we aim to digitize and image approximately 2 million specimens of pteridophytes. These include both fossils and herbarium specimens, specimens of extant pteridophytes. And finally, we want to provide those data via digital portal and provide tools for not only accessing those data, but for analyzing those data, for disseminating those data. And I'll focus a bit on this portal in just a second. I don't really need to say this for this but I should point out that pteridophytes in the context of this project are a little bit different than many of us may think. It does indeed include the ferns and their extinct relatives, and the lipophytes and their extinct relatives. The pteridophytes also includes the seed-free extinct relatives of the seed plants, as well as very early plants that are not closely related to ferns or lipophytes or seed plants. So it's a huge swath of plant diversity. We've made good progress so far. We're about a year in. We are a little bit over 800,000 records, and this includes, for the extant stuff, both herbarium records, and we have pulled in iNaturalist records. Of those, about half, maybe, are georeferenced, about half are imaged, and about half are identified as species. So we're very much in the beginning phases, but we're quite pleased with the progress that we've been making to date. The fossil data has been much slower, and part of that is because fossils are much more difficult to work with. They're much harder to digitize. But also we've had some delays, some development delays. The portal is in Symbiota, and we're working on the development of a module devoted specifically towards paleo data that will allow us to both store and serve those data in the most effective way. And that is not quite available yet. It should be so very soon. This portal that I've been mentioning has been our main accomplishment, the Pterido portal. Don't hesitate to direct your browsers to pteridoportal.org. This is the site in which we hope to have all of these data available. It has many tools. The most basic tools that you might expect are search functions. So you could go within the portal and do a search, and not just any search. You could say, for example, that you're interested in a particular polygon around Tucson, and you're interested in only records of Pteridacea. And if you were to enter that search, you'd find that as of about a week ago, we have almost 400 records. You could go to a particular one of those records. What did you say?
All collected by Mike Window.
All collected by Mike Window. This one not, apparently. You can go to a particular record, and you can pull up all the details associated with that record, including a high-resolution scan of the image. So all available at your fingertips via your browser. There are many other tools. What I want to highlight is the checklist tools. I think this is pretty exciting, and I hope I can get some people interested in pursuing this more. If you go to the checklist, I made a very rough draft of a checklist of the birds of California. And what's particularly exciting about this interface, in my opinion, this tool, is that each of the records in your checklist you can directly associate with a voucher in the portal. So you can track as identifications happen, for example. So your checklist is always tied directly to actual specimens. And there's some other tools available. So this is the Howellii specimen that I have chosen as a reference for the inclusion of Howellii, Isoedes Howellii, in the checklist. You can also get the portal to tell you what species it has records of within your geographic range of that checklist that you don't have on your checklist yet. And so you can see if you're missing anything. In this particular case, there's a few things I haven't added that definitely occur, like Capillus and Chastensi. And there's a few things that are probable misidentifications that I should follow up on, and a few things that might be horticultural things that slip through. Anyway, it's a very useful tool for seeing if you've missed anything when you design your checklist. And you can design a checklist for any geographic region of your choosing. So that's just anyone who wants to work on a checklist in the local area, please let me know. Those are just some examples of tools available through the portal. If you wanted to do the other side and contribute to the portal, we do have a crowdsourcing tool. And the crowdsourcing allows you to participate in our digitization. You can pull up an image of a specimen that hasn't had its metadata transcribed yet, and then you can manually transcribe it through this relatively simple interface. Or there's a whole bunch of other tools. You can OCR it. You can get the computer to tell you what the data are. There's lots of translation tools, for example. So if the coordinates are in lat long, you want them to be in decimal degrees. It does all that kind of stuff for you. In this particular case, I've zoomed in on the image, and I see that this was collected by L.H. Henderson, collection 1220. So I put that data in this form, and then I press the dupes button. The dupes button will tell me if there are already in the portal any records, any duplicates of this record. And in this case, it doesn't find one, but it finds one that's close. It finds an L.F. Henderson 1216. I could copy any of the data from that record to this record, and it would happen automatically. And if it was a full dupe, I could copy all the data, and I'd be done with that record. So some really useful tools for increasing the utility, the value of this resource for everybody. Right? This resource is only as useful as the data that are available. So we really hope that people will be interested in helping out through the crowdsourcing. The last thing I want to say about the portal is that it has an underlying taxonomic thesaurus that's roughly based upon PPG, but it's taken, generously provided by Michael Hassler from his checklist of the ferns and lycophytes of the world. And this allows us to map any a name that is on a specimen in an institution that has provided their data. We never change their name. We never alter the identification of an institution's specimen, but we can map it to whatever classification we want. So if there's a specimen that identifies Moradia alata, var laevis, if you search in the portal for Eupodium laevi, it'll find it. And so I think this is also a very useful tool for structuring and organizing these data. And we can, in theory, have multiple different classifications. We've only implemented one so far, but we could have multiple. I'm going to close by saying the goal of the PCC is not simply to digitize and make these data available, of course. It's to facilitate research, to facilitate science. There are many features of pteridophytes and this portal that I think are particularly valuable in that regard. A great example is the fact that pteridophytes have a particularly intimate relationship with the abiotic environment. Both their sporophytic and gametophytic generations are sessile and relatively long-lived. They can't escape their local conditions, and they rely on abiotic factors for both their dispersal and their fertilization. And so there are, in my opinion, an ideal group to study the relationship between organisms and their environment, their abiotic environment. And the portal will allow you to study that relationship not only across space, but through time. And so I think that's a great example of some of the science that we hope the portal will facilitate. Another classic example is the influence of various traits on diversification patterns. And within pteridophytes, for example, we have many independent evolutions of heterospore. So if you're interested in understanding the effect of heterospore on evolutionary trajectories, these data would be very important, very useful for that. And finally, there's lots of exciting avenues to integrate fossil and extant data to better understand the evolution of pteridophytes and vascular plants more broadly. And on that note, I'll make a very quick plug to say that I have foolishly agreed to do 2 talks. And so tomorrow morning, I'll be presenting an example of this sort of approach of integrating fossil and extant data to understand the timeline of plant evolution. And I would invite people to come if you have any interest in that topic. And with that, I'll just thank you very much for your attention. Apparently I talk fast enough. Please don't hesitate to contact us or me directly if you have any questions. And please do take a look at our portal. Check that out. And I'd like to thank both our funding sources and particularly Michael Hassler for providing the classification that forms the foundation for our thesaurus. Thank you very much.
I have several minutes for questions.
Hi. So how is it connected to all of the other herbaria portals
Okay.
and the other herbaria consortiums?
This is a bit of a complicated question, and I'll give a very superficial answer, and then we can talk more about details. So there are many different Symbiota-based portals, and this portal has both its own local community of collections that are contributing directly to this portal, but it also pulls in relevant pteridophyte records from other portals. And so an institution could enter their data in whatever portal they're currently using, and if it's pteridophyte data, we can get it.
Does it come automatically?
More or less. That's why I was thanking Joyce and Ed and Amy at the beginning. It was for that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
It could be scheduled where we could pull it once a week, or depending how active the source data is.
This is Ed, by the way.
You could automatically pull in data from IPT or another Symbiota portal or anything along there, and that be automated because the standards are all set.
Hi, I have a question about the fossils. So you will do all type of fossils, including spores.
Yes.
And if you do spores, you will provide the coordinates?
The geographic coordinates?
No, the coordinates in the
Oh, that's a
slides.
great question. So so the oh, right, I see. So I should talk to Ed about this. Is the answer is yes?
That's being worked in.
Okay.
That is the plan.
Okay, this is part of the paleo module we're developing. So paleo data have lots of unique features that we don't have to deal with in terms of the herbarium specimens. And so knowing the coordinate on the slide where a given spore is essential to find that spore. And so these are the sorts of things that need to be included in the paleo module. That's why this is not a trivial exercise to get this paleo module going. I think the paleobotanists have it nailed, but we have to do the translation from the curation to the digitization. Yeah.
But my question was, so obviously there are other exciting data that are becoming more accessible, spore data, more like reproductive mode, chromosome data, counts and images. Are those types of things meant to be incorporated as characters, or does it sort of, is there
That's
limit?
right. So the question is this a venue? Is this an avenue for incorporating other sorts of data, specifically things like reproductive mode or spore size or ploidy or who knows? Generally speaking, so the answer is yes, possibly. The core data here are voucher data. They are data associated with the specimen itself. But there are lots of avenues. I didn't talk about any of the tools that are related to taxa. So there are lots of taxa-based tools. We can, for example, develop character lists for all of the taxa, and then you can automatically generate keys. You can automatically generate keys for the taxa that are included specifically in the checklist that you have just made. So there are lots of avenues for the inclusion of other data. Some of them may not be as easy as others. Ed?
So there's a new module that we're developing in collaboration with the Northeast Consortium, but also the California Consortium, CC2 portal. And it's called occurrence traits, where you define the trait in the states, and then you could go through and code that using the images, and it's like, multi-state traits, or measurements and stuff like that it will support. So that is being built in, and that can be activated in this portal once it's developed.